Hello, friends. Welcome to the training video from ARKSD Consultancy Private Limited, presented by me, Ashwani Tripathi. So, today we are going to discuss about basics of AL programming in this video. Before I start the video, will request to please like, subscribe, and press the bell icon so that you get timely notification when I release my future videos. Also, share with others so that it reaches to someone who may need this. So, without wasting further any time, let's proceed to today's agenda. So, basically, we are going to discuss today about the basics of AL programming. Let's start. So, AL application language is basically a programming language for Business Central, and it's written in Visual Studio Code. So it has the capability to control the implementation of objects, interact with the users, contains a set of predefined functions that you can use when writing the code. You can also develop your own custom functions. Event triggers such as on insert, on modify, or on delete are available. These triggers availability depends on the type of objects. The function trigger are the custom functions, and it will be accessible in the object by function triggers. These custom functions are normally known as procedures. AL enables you to create variables that you can use in functions to calculate or store your temporary data. So basically, the central concept of AL, when we say the programming in AL, so there is few rules that we have to follow that are in the form of identifiers, syntax, and variables. These are the basically the central concept of your AL and your other programming languages as well. So an identifier is a name of a programming element. Programming element, when you say, it could be the name of your variable or other such things. So AL identifier is the name of a programming element, while a variable is a location in the memory where data is stored. So you say that I have a 32 GB RAM. So when you are creating any variable, it gets created in some small part of that RAM. So this variable is given a name of that location where that value will be stored. So you can use an identifier to give your variable a name so that you can use it. Because it is not possible to easily access the addresses of the memories. So better what you do, you define a name, and then you, sorry. So you can use an identifier to give your variable a name so that you can use it. So basically, it will be easy to access those values by some name rather than referencing to the address of any particular area of your memory. So syntax, basically, when we are communicating, we uh, talk between two persons. So we follow some set of rules to communicate our information. So similarly, when you are talking with the system, you will follow some syntax which that system understands. Like a person in America, if you start talking to him in Russian, it will be hard for him to understand. So you have to speak in his language so that he can understand. So that is the syntax what the the other person can understand. So similarly, the system can also understand some set of syntax which you can use to communicate what you need from the system. So syntax basically describes the grammatical rule for using these identifiers, how these identifiers will be accessed. Like you want to say, I want to store a value 5 in variable X. So how to communicate this to the system? So the way of writing this code is known as syntax. Or you want to give some instruction to the system to perform any task. So again, via syntax only, you will be giving your instructions. So the syntax of the identifiers is determined by the application language. In our case, is the AL language and some best practices. So there are some best practices which you should follow to write your code, because the same thing can be, you can say that you can say same thing to communicate the same information to another person in different manners. So what will be the like you can in your normal language you can communicate professionally, you can communicate technically, and so on. So there are some best practices which we should follow to communicate our instructions to the system or your syntax. A few grammatical rules are in place for using identifiers. Within one object, all identifiers must be unique. Like if we are talking about you are having 4 or 5 variables, if you give the same name to all the variables, how the system will identify which particular variable you want to refer. So any identifiers you use in your system should be unique. Therefore, within one object, you cannot declare two variables with the same identifier or name. Also, to make the program more readable and easy, it will be good to follow the first character should be underscore or a letter. When you use a special character or a space in the identifier, you must enclose the identifier within the double quotation marks. So the application language is not case sensitive, but it doesn't differentiate between upper and lowercase letters in identifiers. That's why it is recommended that you create identifiers with a Pascal case. Do you understand what is the Pascal case? Pascal case means that you start a name of a variable with an uppercase, means first character should be a uppercase character, followed by lowercase. So if your name is a combination of two words, so you can start the second word with an uppercase letter as well. Like if you have a variable for storing a customer name, so you can use customer, in which C will be capital, and then name, and N will be capital, no space between these. So total will be customer name, where C and N will be in uppercase. So, which is a good example of a Pascal case notification. So, before you start working with the variables, you need to declare them. Means, first you need to make system understand that there is something which you are referring. You should give them some name so that later you can use those name to access to those variables. So, which means that the variable must have a identifier. So, there should be some name given to that variable. It should have a scope. Scope is basically the area where your variables will be exposed. Means from where you can access those variables. So, it could be of two type. It could be a local or it could be a global. So local in the sense it could be only accessible within any trigger or any function. And when we say it as a global, so it means in that particular object, that variable can be accessed anywhere. So that is your scope. Then when you are defining the variable, you will also have to define its data type. Means what sort of data you are going to store in those variable, because every data types require a different amount of memory, or you can say a amount size of the memory. So when you are defining a number, a decimal value, or text, or whatever, so every variable will be having a different size. So you need to define the data type so that system can understand how much memory I should allocate to this variable. And before you use any variable, it will be a good to initialize it. Means you give it a default value, some value, so that there is no difference in understanding that what was the value, what you are adding to it, what you are subtracting to it, so that you get the exact result. If you are not defining the initial value, then you will not be able to understand what this variable was already having. So if that variable was having a 5 value already, and you say with this variable add 5 to this variable, so it will make it a 10, but you will say I have only added the 5. So to overcome this kind of confusions, it will be better to initialize your variables before you use them. So scope, as we have already discussed, it is local or it could be a global. So your variable can be defined with a global or a local scope. So if you define your variable with a global scope, your variable will be available everywhere in the object. Therefore, on every triggers, everywhere you want to write some code statements, you will have that variable available. Whereas in the other side, when your scope is local, you can only access that variable in the specific trigger in the procedure where you define it. Outside that procedure or trigger, if you want to access that variable, that will not be available. So when you declare a variable, you need to think about the scope definition and then choose the correct one, what scope you should define. Similarly, the system defined variables, there are many variables that are system defined, which system already provides some value to them. So you can, without declaring, you can directly use them. So system defined variables that are automatically defined and maintained by the system are available. And their scope is also set by the system. The system has already defined where these variables can be accessed. For example, your rec, xrec, these are the few examples of the system defined variables. Over the course, we will see more such kind of variables as and when we reach to that point. So basically, your rec gives the access to your current record of the table or your current record. Whereas the xrec give the access to the previous record, means before it was changed. Like you have retrieved a record from the system and you have changed some value to that field. So, what was the previous value before this data was updated? What was the previous value that is stored in your xrec? And rec is your current record set value. So, a variable always have a certain data type. So, it could be an integer, a text, a code, a date, or option, or so on. So, when a variable is created in a memory, it is initialized, meaning that the variable gets a default starting value before you assign a value to this variable. So, this default value depends on the data type that you use for that variable. Like, for example, if you are defining a numeric data type, so by default, the value will be 0 for that variable. So it will be by default initialized by the 0. Similarly, if you are defining a variable with a string, so the initial value will be a empty string, means blank string. So similarly, if you are defining a variable of type boolean, so variable will have a default value of false. Means by default, any boolean variable you define, it will have the value false. Sorry. So when you are defining or declaring multiple variables of same time, means all are of integer type or all are of a boolean type, so you can use them in same line. It is not required that each and every variable should be defined in separate line. So comma separated list you can provide, and at the end you can define what data type is for this variable. So all the variables that you have defined, like for in my example, is my int, next int, third int. So I have defined these all the three variables of integer type. Similarly, is valid, do check. These kind of variables, these two variables I have defined as a boolean. Also, you can define the variable as protected. So the protected keyword can be used to make variables accessible between tables and table extensions. Also between the page and page extensions. So if you want to only expose some variables as protected, you must create two sections of your var declaration. One with the protected var and one only var. So protected var means any variables defined under it are the variables which you want to define as a protected variable. And if you are using only var, it means you are defining a normal variable. So there are few recommended guidelines when you write the AL codes. So we basically we would recommend that you follow this guideline when you write a AL code, because we have seen that maximum of the time the code are written very haphazardly, and it becomes very hard for any other developer to understand, debug, and make corrections to those codes. So if you follow a set of best practice, so it will be a good idea to have a good clean code. So for example, like in general, when we write a code in code units instead of your objects, so it is always suggested that you write your maximum code in code units rather than writing to the objects directly. So this will promote a clean design and provides the ability to reuse the code. For example, uh, there is some calculation that you have to perform at several places. So if you are directly writing to the objects, so you will have to repeat that code again and again. So better not to repeat the code. It will be a good idea to you give it a modular approach. You write the code somewhere, and wherever you access means want those actions to be performed, you just refer to that code. So this will give you a clean design and provides the ability to reuse the code. It also helps enforce your security. Like when as a user you don't have the direct access to the tables that contains sensitive data like your general ledger entry. So there is some authorized users only who get the access to these tables, or directly making modifications or alterations to these tables are not a good idea, or you can say good practice, or in other way is not allowed as per the permissions, because the permissions are given limited to every users who can add, modify, or delete anything from any objects. So if you put the code that operates on general ledger in a code unit, so you can easily give the code unit access to that table and give the user a permission to run the code unit. Means you are not giving directly access to the user on your general ledger. If he want to change or do any sort of modification, he will have to go through your code unit. And your code unit, you have already written your business rule, which should be followed to modify any data. So this way you can control the unauthorized access to your data. So then you don't want to compromise with your security of the table, and the user will be able to access the table. So if you put your code on an object instead of your code unit, then sometimes it happens that there is a limitation due to which we have to write the code in the object itself. Then in that case, it will be better you put the code as close as possible to the object on which it operates. Means if your code is uh, dependent on any particular field's value, so it will be a good idea to write the code inside the validate trigger of that particular field rather than writing somewhere else. So, for example, put your code that modifies the record in the trigger of the table fields. So, reusing the code, or you can say the modular approach. So, your reusing code makes developing applications both faster and easier. More importantly, if you organize your AL code as suggested, your application will be less prone to the errors. By centralizing the code, you won't unintentionally create inconsistencies by performing the same calculation in many places. For example, in several triggers that have the same table field as their source expression, if you have to change the code, you could either forget about some of these triggers or make mistake when you modify one of them. So if it is a centralized, so you have to just make the modification at one place, and and your change will be reflected to everywhere. So basically, now we will see what data types we use in our AL language. So, in broader way, high level, if we divide our data types, so that can be divided into two groups. One, we can say the fundamental data types, and second, we will say a complex data types. So let's have a look on this. So basically, your fundamental data types can be divided into sub values, and it always holds one value. Like, for example, if you are defining a numeric variable. So, for numeric operations, what data types are available for you? That is your action, integer, big integer, decimal, option, char, byte, and duration. So these are some type of means if you want some numeric type of values, so you can use these type of data types. Similarly, for string-like operations, you have text and code. We will go into each of them further in the due course. Here is just to list you what data types we have. Other than your numeric and string values, you have certain other types of data that could be a Boolean value, that could be your date, time, or date and time. So basically, the option data type is zero based enumerator type. Therefore, you can convert option values to integers. So an option data type is a numeric data type. For that reason, because the option values are stored as integers. Similarly, the char data type is a single character. Therefore, it is also stored as a number. It's using the ASCII character of that character. So you can only have 256 characters. So a character can only have a value from 0 to 225. The action data type isn't available as a data type for a field in a table, but it's used to specify what action that a user performs on a page. Like the page run model or run model methods, which we will discuss later in this learning path. So returns an action. So following actions are available, that are like OK, cancel, lookup OK, lookup cancel, yes, no, run object, and run system. Rest we will go into detail as and when we encounter in our course. So complex data types are basically data types when you want to work with records in a table, pictures, bitmaps, or disk files. These data types can store multiple values. So application language contains numerous complex data types. So few of them are listed here. That is a big integer, blob, code unit, date formula, dialog, file, build ref, GUID, in-stream and outstream, key reference, page, query, record, record ID, record reference, report, system, table filter, variant, list, and dictionary. So basically, your record data type points to the record of a specific table. And record hold multiple values because they because they include multiple fields, and every fields can be of different data type. So combination of this all makes it a complex data type. So we will have a short view on options and enums. So to define a variable of type option, you can't use the option members property that is used on your field of data type option. So when you are defining an option in your AL program or in your objects, like any trigger or any procedure, so that time you don't have access to the option members. So what you will do, you need to list the available options as a comma separated list after your variable definition, like color and option, it is type option, and the values are red, green, blue, yellow. So this will define a variable color of type option with values red, green, blue, and yellow. So if you want to reuse the same option in your other objects like your code unit, page, or tables, so you have to redefine all available values. Later, if you decide to add an extra value, you need to modify all the objects with this extra value wherever you have defined that option. So options in a table are basically not extendable, means it cannot be extended with the table extensions. So the better approach for that is you use enum. This is introduced in your AL programming. Earlier we were only having options when we were coding into CAL. At that time we were having options. So now to overcome this limitation in AL programming, we have means Microsoft has introduced enum. So you can use the enum objects. So basically, an enum object is a separate object with its own number and name. So you can use the enum object in every object with means you don't need to redefine it. The enum object can also be extended with enum extensions. So that will be better if you define a enum variable. So further in due course, if you want to extend the value, like at the time of definition, you are having 4 values. So here you see extensible equal to true, means this enum can be extended. If you set it as a false, then means this cannot be extended. So you have defined the value with red, green, blue, yellow. So 4 values you have defined. Later in due course, you want to change or add few more values to this enum. So you can extend it and add your extra values. So when accessing the enum, you will define it as my selected color. This is my variable or my identifier. Then enum of type color. So this is how you are going to define your enum. So now we come to our collections. So basically in AL, we have 3 types of collection. So collection is a complex type that contains multiple value in one variable. All of those collections are strongly typed, which means that you can't have values with different types in same collection. For example, you can't add data values in a collection that only allows integer values. So if you want a date values, that can be you have to define a different collection. A date, integer, decimal, and all kind of values cannot be stored in a single complex data. So these 3 types of collections that is supported by your AL are arrays, list, and dictionary. So let's have a quick look on these values. So basically, array are complex variables that contain a group of values with same data type. An array is declared as a variable with the following trails, like it should have an identifier, it should have a data type, it should have one or more elements, an index, a dimension. So to define an array, you will define as, like here, sales amount. This is my identifier or my variable. We are defining the array of 10, means 10 is elements. 10 elements will be in this array of integer type. Means it can store 10 integer values. So when you are accessing the element of an array, you will say your variable name in square bracket, you will provide your element number or your index. So this defines basically a one dimension array. So if you want to define a multi-dimensional arrays, you can use a comma separated list between the brackets as sales amount array of 6 rows, 9 column, which will be storing the integer value. Similarly, to access them, you can use row column index, and this is basically assigning a value to 0. So when you are counting your array elements, so you should start with 1. While in other programming language like Java, C Sharp, or such other programming language, usually you will see that they start counting at 0, means the first element is 0. Whereas in AL, the first element is 1. So having only one element between the square bracket indicates that you are using one-dimensional array. If you want to have a multi-dimensional array, use a comma separated list between the bracket, as you have seen here. We have defined array of 6 row, 9 column. So next we will look to the list. So the list data type can be compared with an array. It is similar to the array only. The list type can only be used with fundamental types and represents a strongly typed list of values that can be accessed by index. So it cannot be defined as a complex data type. So it should be only for the fundamental data type. So you can have a list type of integer, but you cannot have a list of type blob. So that you cannot define. The list data type uses the system.collections.generic.list class from the .NET framework, which enables you to use some built-in methods. So it has few of the methods already defined, which you can use to access and operate with them. The methods that are available for the list data type, we will discuss in a later video of this training video series. However, the following example shows you how you can create a new variable with a type of list. So we are defining employee name is a list of text, means text type values can be stored. So when you are want to save some values to the list, so you can say add whatever the name you want, like here Sanjay, add Rajesh. And when you want to access that particular, so you have to say get and its index, means the name that is stored at first index. So it will return you that Sanjay is the case. So second one is a dictionary. So basically the dictionary data type uses your system.collections.generic.dictionary, and it has two values, key and the actual value that you want to store. So this is the class defined in your .NET framework, which enables you to use some built-in methods. This data type represents a collection of keys and values. So basically, when you declare, like I'm defining a country employees, it is a dictionary of code 20, means this will be a key, and list of text, means your list type, any values will means multiple names will be there. Means in, for example, in India, there is Sanjay, Ravi, Suresh, Ramesh, etc. So when you add, you will say that first is your key, means IN, means I am adding the employees for your India, and the employee's name, like we have defined in the previous example. So you can add any list for different countries, means for India, US, UK, and so on. So when you want to access, so you will say get provide the key value, and then inside that list, which index you want to access. So means the list that is stored as in, means India. Out of that, the second in the list, the second element, second employee name. So in this case, it will give you the Rajesh. So now we will see into assignments and type conversion. So with an assignment statement, you can set a value to a variable. Means you have defined a variable. Now you want to assign some value to that variable. So for that, you will use the assignment operator. So the assignment statement is the most frequently used statement in your application. With an assignment statement, you can set a value to a variable, or the statement will assign a value to a variable, whatever you say. So for example, we have defined A, B, C as integer value. We have defined a details as a text of 50 characters. Means 50 characters is the length of that details. Up to 50 characters you can store. Similarly, we have defined the description with code data type, and its size is 50, means up to 50 characters you can store. Similarly, here now I am defining my integer is equal to 5, means I am assigning a value 5 to the variable my integer. Similarly, for the A, I am saying 2 plus 3, means A will get the value of 5. And for the B, I am saying A plus 5. So A is already having 5. So 5 plus 5 means B is having the value 10. For C, I am saying my integer, which is 5. And B, this is your 10. And A, which is your 5. So whatever the value calculates, that will get assigned to the C. And details, I am saying I am testing assignments. So this is what I have assigned it. And then in description, I am assigning the value of details. So here see, this is a code type and this is your text type. So when you are assigning a value from another variable to a variable, the data type of the value and the variable must be the same. You cannot assign a text value to an integer variable or an integer to a text variable. You cannot assign a big integer value to the integer data type if it exceeds the range of the integer. Means the value in big integer is within the range what the integer can have, then it is okay. If it exceeds that limit, then you cannot do that. The value will be lost. So if you try to convert a decimal value to an integer data, it must be a whole number. Like 10.5 cannot be assigned to the integer. However, 5.0 you can assign. If you try to assign 10.5, 0.5 will be lost. So when you are converting an integer to the character, so that value must be between 0 and 225. If it is beyond that, again, the data will be lost. So here in case, the details we are trying to assign to the description. So it can be done. Only the difference will be all the characters will be converted to uppercase because code type can only store the values in uppercase. Next is our expressions. So what expressions we use? So basically, an expression is a formula that specifies how to generate a desired value and then evaluates to the value. So an expression uses the term and an operator, which can be unary or binary. So you can categorize operators in unary, string, arithmetic, relational, logical. So when we talk about unary operators, so a unary operator only impacts the term that directly follows the operator. Like we have the unary operator, the plus, minus, not. So it do not require two elements, only operates on single element. So like there is an integer, if you put a minus, so it will become a negative value, minus value. Similarly, if you put a plus, it will become a positive value. And you have a Boolean value, you can say not. So if the value is true, it will become false. It will just reverse it. Similarly, your string operators. So in string, you have only one operator, that is your plus sign, which is a binary operator. Binary means where two elements are required. So binary operator because it impacts the terms on either side of the operator. So A plus B. So two terms, and in between there is a operator that is plus, means you are adding. So in the case of a string operator, it will concatenate two strings, because if we are adding two strings, it doesn't gives you any numeric value. What it will do? It will concatenate the value of both the string. So here comes our arithmetic operators. So we are very well known to the arithmetic operators. I hope everyone have learn maths and know the meaning of plus, minus, multiply, and divide. So the same is the here also. So basically, arithmetic operators are used in numeric application. A numeric expression is a formula that results in a numeric value. So you can use the plus, minus, multiply, divide, then integer divide and modulus. So depending on the data types that you use with the arithmetic operators, you can get other data type as a result. So the divide operator or division is a normal mathematical division that you are accustomed to working with until now. If you divide two integer values, you will always end with a decimal value. Like you divide the 3 by 2, we will get a decimal value. So the modulus operator basically finds the remainder of the division of one number by another number. Like here, if we are dividing the 5 by 2, it will give you the result 2.5. If we are saying 5 div 2, so you will get the 2 integer value. If I say 5 modulus 2, so you will get the remainder of that, that is 1. So the order in which the operators are applied could have an effect that can significantly influence the outcome of your calculation. Like in mathematics also, you use BODMAS rule. So similarly, here also you will follow the same thing. So the highest level will be given to your unary operators. First, it will give preference to your unary operators. Then second level, it will give preference to multiply, divide, div, and mod. And at the lowest level will be your binary operator, that is plus and minus. So you can change the order or get the other result by putting the expression using the sub-expression parenthesis. So this way you can have your calculations. So next we are going to see the relational expression. So basically we have this relational operators like A value is equal to B value, or A is less than B, or A is greater than B, or A is less than equal to B, and A is greater than equal to B. A is not equal to B, and in. So rest of the things I think is clear. Just like equal to, less than, greater than, less than equal to, less than equal to, not, and comes the in. So in is basically a set. So when we say 5 in this set, so if you see in this set we don't have the 5. So it will return you a false, means no, this value is not available. When we see 5 in this, so here is the range you have given. So 1 to 9 means your 5 is between 1 to 9. So in this case, it will give you result as true. Similarly, in this case, 4 to 6 you have given the range. So 5 is in between 4 to 6. So again you will get the true value. Similarly, the 10 in this. So if you see, 10 is not between 1 to 9 and not between 11 to 19. It is between 9 and 10, but your no range. So it will give you a false. Similarly, the M in A to Z. So yes, it is there because M lie between A to Z. Then comes our logical operators. So logical expressions are basically and, or, XOR, and not. So with the AND operator, both value must be true to result in true. Otherwise, the value will be always false. So if I'm saying A and B, so A and B, both values should be true. Then only it will return you a true. Else, if A is true and B is false, then it will result you false. A is false and B is true, then it will return you false. If A and B both are false, then also the value is false. Means values must be true to, both the values must be true to result in true. So I want this and this. So if both are available, then we have to do something. Similarly, or. So either of the value must be true. Means either A is true or B is true. So your result will be true. So means it will must be true to both the value. One of the values must be true. Like true false, false true, true true. Only false and false will give you a false. So if one value is true, one of the value must be true to result in true. Now XOR, to exclusive OR basically. So the only one value can be true to result in true. If both are true, then also it will be false. Both are false, then also it is false. Means either A is true or B is true. So this is the only difference between OR and exclusive OR. And the NOT operator is all logical values are reverted. Like if not true will give you false. Means if the value is true, it will revert it to false. So this is how it works. Then is uh, Boolean express. So when programming or using application language, you will also encounter Boolean expressions. A Boolean expression is an expression that results in a Boolean value. And for that, you can use a Boolean variable or constant. Typically, relational and logical expression evaluate into the Boolean values. So we have seen that the logical expressions and your relational operator. So both will result you in Boolean result. So in that case, you will be using your Boolean expressions. Let's so now we will discuss about the AL statements. So the first thing which we would like to discuss is regarding comments. see the demo also. So when we are talking about the comments, it is always a good practice to comment your code. A comment is a description or extra explanation in your code about your code, means what your code is doing, why you are writing that code. So it will give an insight to the other developer who is debugging or in future making any changes to those code. So he can read your mind, what you have thought before you writing this code. It will be always a good practice to comment your code. So the comment statements aren't considered as a coding. This is not part of your code. So when the program runs, it will ignore anything marked as comments. The statements are only available so other developers can better understand the code that you have written. So you have a I'm having a throat problem. So a comment is a description or an extra explanation in your code and about your code. So the different type of comments that you can include in your code is like a line comment, means a particular line you want to comment out. So you will use two forward slash. Second is your block comment, where in the starting you will put one forward slash and a star, and then at the last you will put star and your forward slash. So in Visual Studio, you can select edit and then toggle line comment, or you can use your shortcuts as defined. You can, in a while, we will see what those are. So similarly, you can define your blocks. So let's move to the demo and see how this works. So first we will see that how we comment. So the one way of doing the commenting is you can do it from here, toggle a line comment or a block comment. So these are two menu options, or you can directly write into your editor. So when we are saying the line comment, so you can put like this. So this is the example of one line comment. And if you are going to do the multiple comments, means multi-line comments, then in that case, you will use this forward slash star and then star and forward slash. So here, if you see, here I have given the example how you can use the multiple line comment. So basically, the developers normally use the comments to comment out their garbage code. So while developing, it is okay. You have few of the garbage code, but once your code is completed, tested, and accepted, so it is a best idea to remove your those unnecessary codes. Yeah, for the information if you are using the comments, that is a good practice. But unnecessarily keeping the garbage in the code is not a good idea. So I will recommend, once your code is finalized, you have accepted the code, your testing is over, and you are going to do the final release, you remove the unwanted code. So until now, we have seen two types of comments. One is the line comment, and second one is the block comment. Okay. So if we come back, you will see we are having some more types of comments. One is your XML comments. Why we use this XML comments? So in your Dynamics 365 Business Central, you can add documentation to your code by including XML elements in SPML in special comment fields directly in the source code. So before the block of the code that the comment refers to. Like, for example, I am writing the code here. So it is basically giving the idea about what this code unit is doing. So what is the purpose of having this code unit or this object? So, for example, you can write like this. This is your called XML comments style. So you put that, you can see that the triple forward slash is used in each line. So the XML notation, we have used the summary. Summary means about this. I have written above the object definition. So whenever you hover your screen, means on that variable, so it will show you this is a demo comment. So this gives an more clear idea to the other developers what this particular code is doing and what is the purpose of having this object. So this is one way how you can do. Second way here it is, for the function I am providing the information, and this is the function which is add numbers, and it has two parameters, second and first parameter. So this procedure returns the sum of two numbers. This is the summary of this my procedure. So see, this is the procedure returns the sum of two numbers. It adds here. Then I have written about the parameter, the first number to be added. So here if you see the first number to be added. So this type of definitions and other things you can see, and returns the total of two input numbers. So basically, in a nutshell, I have defined that this procedure is used to sum two values and return the total of that value. So in the summary part, I have written the what my function is doing or procedure is doing. Then I have defined the parameters and the returns, what this function will return. So anyone in future, if it comes to this code, he can easily see what this function is for and what are those parameters. So he can understand better of about your code. Okay. So this is the one way. Second is the code region compiler directives. This is basically when you are working with long files, very large code, block of code. So this can help you organize your code and concentrate on the part on which you are working. Like see, I have given here the region sample code, and here I have given the end region. So if you see on the screen, I can have only this one. Then I have to scroll below to find the code. So this will help you to reduce the screen size. So in this way, I have closed all the code, And if I want to this, I can do this also. Here is the region code. So this way I have put my code. So between region and end region, whatever it is, you can code it like this. So this type of comments are also very helpful. Try using it. It is a good practice. So your code comments basically improve the readability of the code that you have developed, and they are very useful for anyone modifying or maintaining that code later on. So hope you understand the purpose of why we should follow the comment. So you have four types of way to organize your code and comment. One is the one line code. Second one is the block comments. Then XML, the description about your object or procedures or whatever. And the code region to save space on screen. So section wise, you can have your code. So in particular, which section you want to work, you can just mm, uh, open that region and look into your code. So this way you do not to keep scrolling between the codes. So it will be easy to jump to and fro from one section to another section. So next we will, before I continue, I would like to have some code comments basically improve the readability of the code that you have developed, and they are very useful for anyone modifying or maintaining the code. Further, more code comments from the basis of auto generated document. So the great code comments means if you want to write good code, so you should follow some guideline. So never state that obvious. Like we say, if he is a developer, he must be knowing this. He can understand what I am writing. So nothing is obvious. You should explain what you are writing. So it will be easy for other developer to take up from where you left. Always write a meaningful comment and use precise wording to describe why you are writing that code. Just imagine yourself in the shoe of a developer using this piece of code. If someone else has written this code and you have to debug into this or make any changes to this code. So the same way the other developer is also having the problem with the code, to understand the code and the reason of writing the code. So it will be a best practice to always follow the proper commenting. So it is similar like the comment is like if any code comes to you and if you have to make any changes, or so what questions will you ask before to proceed on that code? So understand that other developer is also having the same queries. So you should very precisely describe why you are writing this code and what is the reason behind it. And for your properties and methods, use active wording such as this procedure sets the value of this or gets the value of this, and specify such kind of words you can use, and explain why you are doing that particular piece of code. You should always list all the preconditions of your parameters, that it should not be null, must be within the certain range, and so on, whatever you want. Means a brief idea, so that another programmer can understand what are the limitation of this function, and uh, what are the acceptable values for this function or other part of code. So list any post conditions that could influence how caller deal with the return values. Means once your code has executed, what will happen? So like you can define what is the return value of this value, so that programmer can understand that when this piece of code happened, so these are the post conditions which we need to handle. So list any exceptions the method may throw, and under what circumstances. So when you are writing the code, you have tested, and you must be knowing that in what condition your functions is failing. So you can mention those things also. These are the exceptions to my function. These things will be handled, and these things cannot be handled. And if any similar method exists, explain the difference between them. Sometimes what happens, there is already some code, but due to some specific reason, you cannot use that code, some differences. So you should define that why you are replicating this code again. There should be some valid reason for rewriting any function. And call attention to anything unexpected, such as modifying global state or whatever your code may be doing. Enumerate any side effects if there are, if any. Be consistent and conscious. Make sure that your comments are reviewed, so that it is easy for other to understand your code. So similarly, when we have seen that the code region compiler directives, so I would like to have some words on this also. So these code regions are used to structure related code and add documentation of code sections, and expand or collapse these for fast navigation in your code with easy outlining of the code. So it is not like only at the starting and end of the procedure. Your procedure may be of very long. So still you can place several reasons that this is the area where values are getting initialized. This is the area where calculation is happening. This is the area where end result is uh, coming from the function. So these kind of things you can do to better means other developer or even you in the future, you can directly target to the area where you want to work. If you know that the problem is in the initialization area, or in the processing area, or in the return area, so similarly you can dive into that section directly and look the code over there and do the right modification over there. The region directive is used to mark a block of code that you can expand or collapse, as we have seen. This can, for example, be useful for large files, for better readability, or for focusing on the code that you are currently working on. The end region specifies the end of the region. Then let's come to the next section, the compound statement. Compound statements are basically a single statement that consists of multiple statements. Compound statements are in dictated by begin and end. So anything you write between begin and everything in between is one compound statement. So this way of writing the code is referred to as the compound statement. Then comes your conditional statements. So your conditional statements are used heavily in any programming language. Whatever language you are using, most of the time you will be using your conditional statements. Even in your application language AL also you use the same code, same way of coding. A conditional statement is used to test a condition. Based on the evolution of that condition, it might run one or more statements. Depends how much statements you have to run. So, to have more details on this conditional statements, I will be showcasing you the if statement, then if, then else statement, and case statement. So, let's have a quick demo on this. So, here I am having a if statement. So, this procedure is basically trying to find the difference between first number and the second number. So here what I say, if first number is greater than second number, then difference is first minus second. Then I'm saying if second number is greater than first number, then difference is second number minus first number. And I am showing that as a message. So if you see here, because by default, if will only consider the first line. But if this condition is true, then I want these two lines to be considered. To do that, we will have to use the compound statement. So for that, we will enclose our code between begin and end. So means this condition, if true, then begin and until here, whatever is written is everything to be executed. So this becomes a compound statement. So here you get the example of if condition and compound statement also. And finally, I exit the difference value, that is the return value. Now I will go to another section. This is if then else statement. The same code I am writing in different way. If first number is greater than second number, then difference is this. Now if you see, I have not used the semicolon here because this if statement is at not completed. I'm saying else do this. So in else I am using the compound statement, begin and end. But in if condition, I am using a single statement. And by default, if considers only the first line until it is addressed between begin and end, means compound statement, then only it will consider all the lines between that. Otherwise, if will also consider only first line and the else will also consider the first line. So this is how the compound statements and if statements and if then else statement is used. Next one, Here is one more if then else. So this is basically showing the if then else statement, but this time it is the case of nested if and else. If this, then this, else, if this, then this, else, if this, then this, and if this is not true, then this. Similarly, so the first statement, if it is not zero, is put into the compound statement, and rest all are single line statements, so we can follow without compound statements. If you have multiple lines to be executed for that particular condition, then you will have to add begin and end to make it a compound statement. Now, the case statement. This is also used as a your conditional statement. So I am passing grade as a parameter. So case, I am saying if grade is A, then do this. If grade is B, then do this. Similarly, here in E, I am using the compound statement. I want two lines to be executed. And if none of this, whatever the list you have provided, if it is none of them, then you put the else and it will say this. So every case will be with the end. So this is itself a compound statement. And within this, if you want to make any particular section a compound statement, you will have to add the begin and end. Okay. So, so we have seen how the if statement works, how if then else statement works, and how the case statement works. The next topic we are going to discuss is the repetitive statement. So you can use repetitive statements when you want to repeat the implementation of one or more statements. Means this particular thing should happen 4 times, 5 times, 10 times. Means you want to make a loop. Means multiple time you want to execute the same instruction for any given time condition. So you have 5 type of repetitive statements available, out of which any of them you can use as per the need. So for to do, for to do, for down to do, for each in do, while do, and repeat until. So we will look into each of them in a demo. So first of all, we will see into for. So here what I do, for counter is equal to 1 to 5, means when the value of counter is 1 until 5, I want to make a total. So total will be, it will keep adding the counter. Like for in this condition, the counter value is 1. We have assigned that counter will start from 1. Okay. So in the first recursion, what happens? Total plus 1. Total is already 0. Initial value will be 0 for the integer. So 0 plus 1. So now total becomes 1. Then loops will move to the next step and the counter will become 2. Now total is already 1 plus 2. It will become 3. Then 3, 3 plus 3, 6. Then 4, 6 plus 4, 10. Then 5, 10 plus 5, 15. So total is 15. So basically what happens? This loop will run 5 times. So it will keep adding the counter value to your total variable. And after this loop is over, what I have done? I have printed that total. Now the another way, number of loops I have said it should be 5. Okay. So I am initializing counter is equal to 1 and up to number of loops. Means how many times? 5 times this loop should happen. And this time the total plus number of loop. Number of loop is always a constant 5. So it will add 5 times. At the first occurrence, number of loop value is 5. Then in the second occurrence, again the number of value is 5. So similarly, means you are running 5 times. So 5 is added 5 times and the total is printed. So this is one example how you can use your for loop. So one is this way and another is this way. Depends how you use them. Then just opposite of for is down to. So here we start with the highest number and go until the lowest number. So down to 1, counter value is 5 and down to 1 I have to repeat this loop. And here I am using the begin and end means compound statement. These two lines will executed in every occurrence. So what it will do? Counter value at initial it is a 5 and now the total plus counter. So total is already 0, so 5. And number of loops it is saying plus 1. Number of loop is also 0, so 1. So basically this is counting how many times the loop have executed. And this is adding the number 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. So this way it will substitute the value here and here. The first will be replaced by the total and number of loops will be replaced here. So the total is 15, loop executed 5 times. So this will be the result of this code. Now we see to the for each. So for each what happens? If you provide a list, so it will go into each value. So like here I have employee name I have defined of text 100 and employee names a list type of text. So what I have done, I have added the names in the list Sanjay, Rajesh, Santosh, Arvind, Atul. So total this 5 names I have stored in this employee names. So for each employee in employee names. So in every execution what it will do, it will pick one name from here and transfer here, and we will print that name. So there is a 5 name, so this loop will run 5 times. So each time it will give you the second element. So this way, one by one, we will get these values into a employee name variable. And then we are printing this name. Means 5 times the dialog box will appear with Sanjay, Rajesh, Santosh, Arvind, and Atul. 5 times the message will be shown to you. So this way you can use the for each. Means you have multiple values and you have to process the loop for each and every elements. So you can, in that case, use the for each. So this is one example how you can use this. Now here is the repeat until. So repeat until is basically we use with our uh, record variables or such kind of things. Anyway, here is the example. So here I say repeat until. So it is becoming a compound statement. All these 3 lines will get executed. And this loop will run until the counter comes to greater than 5. So first time the counter is 0. So total plus 0. Number of loops plus 1. So 0 plus 1, 1. And counter becomes plus 1. This is also the way how you can write plus minus without repeating the variable. So this way it will repeat until, so when it comes to counter at when it comes 5, so 5 is greater than 5, no, so it will re-enter the loop, and when the counter becomes 6, it will exit. So until the counter becomes 6, this loop will happen. So this will, what will do, counter will be 0 to 6 this time. So you will be having 1 plus 2 plus basically 0, 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, because at no, plus 5. When after 5 plus 1, 6, it is greater than, then it will exit. So basically 5 times you are adding that, and once this loop is over, you will print the value of total and number of loops. Okay. And this is the example how the repeat until is used with the record variables. So customer is basically the record of my customer table. So find set, repeat until. For every record, what you want to do, you can perform here. It could be you will add value, modify value, delete value, whatever action. We will look into this later, how to use this. But it execution works like this. Okay. Then comes the with statement. So basically, since with we used to in cal, but now in AL it is getting depreciated. So the extensibility model and the AL programming language is the successor to your cal language. And the with statement, which was being supported by the AL until now, will not be carry forward in the coming versions. So it will be a good idea to drop to writing the code with statement. So while using the with statement might make code harder to read. It can also prevent code in Business Central from being upgraded without changes to the code, or even worse, your upgraded but with changed behavior. We distinguish between these two types of with statements. Is One is explicit type, of which using the keyword, and the implicit, with which is not expressed directly in the code. Like in tables and other things, we directly use the variable name. So now we will have to uh, intentionally provide the record variable to access the fields, because at that time it is already understood that when we are accessing the field name, means we are referring to the same table. Anyway, so this is just how it works. I have given the demo, but it will be good idea not to use it in future. So with customer means customer is a record variable. So I am saying that number is equal to this, name is equal to this. Means basically we are saying that cust dot number equal to this, and cust dot name is equal to this. So this is how we need to write now. So going forward, this is not going to support. So it will be better idea not to use this anymore. And last is your break statements. So break statement is basically if you want to break the loop on a specific condition, then you can use the break. It will exit you from the innermost loop. So in this case, the innermost loop is this. So when I say break, means it will jump to this statement. So that is the same for loop I have used from 1 to 20. And when total is greater than 55, it will break. So we are adding the total. So we will keep looping until your total becomes greater than 55. The moment it becomes 55, it will break. And you can print your total over here. So this was what I want to demo. Let's come back to. So these are the loops which we have discussed. We have also seen the with statements. Demo I have already performed for this. So with statements is now depreciated. So it will be better not to use going forward. And then comes your break statement if you want to. So here we come to the end of today's session. So I would like to request you again to please like, subscribe, and press the bell icon so that you get timely notification when I release my future video. Also, do please share with others so that it reach to someone who may need this. You may be having experience, you may be knowing about all those things, but there are several consultants who is starting their career, or they are not very clear with their basics. So this video can help them. So please contribute to that and share with others. Thanks for being with me. Thank you. See you in the next video. Bye. Take care.